All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? There's a seat there. There's a seat there. I have a seat here. Figure it out. So, how are you doing today?
Very good.
Very good. Awesome. So, what we are going to do today is continue our conversation with the basics of economics. What did we talk about last time? Yeah, go ahead.
We talked about what economics was.
Uh-huh.
We also talked about cost-benefit analysis.
Let's go back a little bit. What is economics about?
I think it's
Absolutely. Optimally allocate scarce resources. What is a scarce resource? What's exceeds our ability to fulfill those wants. Excellent. And so as a result, we have to make what? Choices. We also gave our first rule of economics. Remember what it was? In the back. Incentives matter. What does that mean? Right. Perfect. If you change incentives, you change behavior. Again, a straightforward idea, but as we talked about, there's nuance and depth there that is easy to ignore. We also, as mentioned, discussed path dependence, cost-benefit analysis, trying to get the most out of life, right? Because if we are making choices, if we recognize we cannot do everything, then we need to figure out how to make the best choices. Now we play the is there enough chairs game? Are there enough chairs game? You can use this one. Yeah. Any questions? Nope. Moving on. Great. So today you had a Bastiat reading that I asked you to do. Tell me about that Bastiat reading. Yeah, go ahead.
It basically was summing up how when things happen in our economy and we're forced to spend money on one thing or another, it basically determines whether people are able to spend money on one thing or another versus how they're not able to spend money on another thing.
Exactly right. And so we shouldn't, like, if something breaks and we have to replace it, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
In the short term, it's a good thing because the person who has to repair it gets paid, but in the long term, it's a bad thing because the person who got paid to repair it isn't able to spend money on something else. Okay,
so I agree, except I'm a little concerned about the short-term, long-term distinction. Because if I'm selling something that I don't get paid for because somebody is spending the money to place in a window, that seems bad for me in the short term as well.
But it's for the short term, the consumer.
Well, so let's go back. What's the story that's told in the Bastiat reading?
A kid broke a window. And repair it.
Okay.
And the window guy got paid 6 francs for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was basically analyzing how that 6 francs was beneficial to the window repairman.
Yep.
But it was detrimental to the family and to the people who could have bought it to repair their shoes or something like that.
Exactly. So is it good that the window was destroyed?
No.
No. Why not? Yeah.
The story talks about the unseen things in the scenario. So people would argue that if you break the window, it's good for the economy because it gives the window repair a job and money and everything. But they also, the author argues that the unseen forces are the other businesses that are not getting that money because they're using 6 francs for the window instead of like something that might satisfy them more, like a new pair of shoes. So basically, the window is broken, but if you spend that money to fix the window, you aren't going to be happy because you still have a window. So
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I love that you brought that up, right? And you still have the window. So yeah, let's imagine. Let's imagine that the window was never broken. So we have scenario A over here. You break the window, you replace it. Scenario B, the window is never broken, and because the window was never broken, you still have the window, and you can spend that money on. I'm going to try to draw a pair of shoes. It's not going to work out very well. There, something like that. Just pretend. And you now have a pair of shoes. In other words, option B, where you have both the window and shoes, is strictly better than option A, where you just have a window. It's not good for the glazer. That's certainly true. But it is good for the cobbler, and it is good for the consumer, because the consumer has more stuff. So rather than it being a short-term, long-term distinction, it's really more of a seen-unseen distinction. It's more of what we see, the activity that we observe, versus the activity that could have been. And it's very easy for us to focus on what we see, and very hard for us to remember what could have been. And that's the point of Bastiatov. Any questions on that? So, how many of you, I can't remember, how many of you have had any economics before? I think, okay, if you, so then you might know the term that describes what Bastiat is talking about. You might know what it's called? Opportunity cost. What were you going to say?
I was about to say opportunity.
You were about to say opportunity cost. Yeah, exactly. Rule number 2 of economics. There are always opportunity costs. Why are there always opportunity costs? What did we talk about last time that demonstrates there are always opportunity costs? Choices. That what do you say?
Yes,
You make choices, right? And therefore, if there's something you choose, that must mean there's something you let go. Exactly, something you give, some good thing you gave up. The kid broke the window. That looks good for one people, but it's good for some. But there is something even better we gave up. The opportunity cost of not breaking the window was pretty high. Questions? We should probably then define opportunity cost when we say it's really important and these always exist. Oh, since you seem to know it, what is opportunity cost? I'm going to get to this in a moment. Don't worry. Anthony, you were quick.
It's like if you have $5 to pick from,
Okay.
I don't know the definition.
All right. But you're right. There's going to be whatever you don't choose is going to be opportunity cost.
Like
It doesn't have to be, no. You might be thinking of comparative advantage. But they have a lot to do with one another. You want to take a stab at it? Foregone benefit. It's the good thing that you do not get. A foregone benefit is a cost, just like a foregone cost is a benefit. Something that a bad thing you avoid is nice to be able to avoid it. Similarly, something that you do not get is a cost. You lose that opportunity. You lose that good thing. All right. We can talk in terms of opportunity cost being high or low. You have an opportunity cost today. You made a choice today. You decided to come to class today. You decided to allocate your scarce resource, that is time, and allocate some of it to coming here. Is your opportunity cost high or low? Would you describe it as high or low?
Low.
Low. Does someone say high or does everyone say low? We'll talk about it. Yeah. High. Why do you say high? That's
kind of like high.
That's true. That's true. But if the cost is high, do you typically do the thing that has a high cost? No. So high cost implies you give up a lot. And the low cost means you give up a little. You don't give up nothing, but relatively speaking, you don't give up that much. I know that for all of you, your opportunity cost is low. How do I know it's low?
Because your education is important.
Nope.
Sacrifice
I mean, it is, but that's not the reason why. Which is, I know for all of you, your opportunity cost is low.
It's not as high.
No?
You've been through the same experience?
Nope. We're all here. Right? Tell me more.
If the opportunity cost is really that high,
Yeah. In fact, I think there's one person missing. You can assume that person's opportunity cost is high. It might be that they're making a mistake, right? But people are rational. It could also be there's a family emergency, right? And it's like, or maybe they just don't care that much. But still, there's some sort of, relatively speaking, there must be a high opportunity cost. That's why they are not here. Okay. Yeah. And so I turn our attention to this diagram. Let's see, how well can you see it? Maybe hit the light. Is that better? Oh, it's a little too dark. There we go. So here we have fluctuations in grad school enrollment. That's the blue line. So these are people who got a bachelor's degree in science and engineering because the data that this person used happens to be for science and engineering. And so this is the fluctuation. So, lots of people going to grad school, few people going to grad school. The red line is the unemployment rate. And this is the economy-wide unemployment rate. It's not specific to them. And so sometimes the economy is doing very well. The unemployment rate is very low. Sometimes the economy is not doing well. The unemployment rate is high. And we go up and down. And then note that there is a correlation coefficient of 0.75 roughly. How many of you have had stats before? Great. What's a correlation coefficient, Francis? What? You completely forgot. That's pretty common. We'll talk about why at the end. We'll talk about that a bit. Unit 3. Anyone remember? What is a correlation coefficient?
I think it's like the number that measures the strength of the relationship between the
Yeah. Maybe not so high. You're going to need this. Yeah, exactly. It remembers the tightness of those relationships, right? The two variables run together. We're kind of curious how. So how high can a correlation coefficient be? 1. Absolutely. And then, what do you say? Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the bounds, right? But the highest is 1, right? And the lowest is -1. And so when they say 0.75, that is indeed very high. So here's my question for you. Why? Why is it that when the unemployment rate goes up, people go to graduate school, and when the unemployment rate sinks down, people don't go to grad school? What's going on there?
Why is it that when people, like the unemployment rate goes up, people go to grad school? Why isn't it that when people go to grad school, the unemployment rate goes up?
Well, so keep in mind, as I mentioned, this is the unemployment rate. For one, I wasn't claiming a causation, but it's worth mentioning. This is the unemployment rate for the whole economy. And this is just fluctuations in grad school enrollment. So it's unlikely that all these people are happy to be going to grad school. Therefore, the unemployment rate goes up because it's like, that's a pretty small segment. Yeah, Grace.
I think because when the rates go down, that means there are less jobs available, so there's less people from that.
Well, when the unemployment rate goes down, there's less jobs available.
I'm sorry, I misheard your question.
So I'm asking, like, why is it when the unemployment rate goes up, more people, right? So this is the economy is not doing well. The unemployment rate is really high. People flood to grad school. The unemployment rate is really low. The economy is doing well. People avoid grad school. What's going on? Yeah. Okay, but that's always going to be true, right? You go to grad school, higher chance to get a job. So that's always true. So why is there such a strong connection between that and the unemployment rate? David. Okay, say that again, David. When the economy is doing well. Uh-huh. Well, you have a bachelor's degree, right? This is grad school enrollment. This is everyone who went to grad school for science and engineering. The red line is the unemployment rate for everybody. The blue line is grad school enrollment. But I like where you're going with this, though. So, if you want to elaborate, if someone wants to jump in. Yeah.
Would it be the opportunity cost is lower when there is less jobs available?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this because you've seen why I bring this up here, right? Yeah. So you use the opportunity cost. What's the story there? So tell me more.
Well, if employment rate is low, I'm less likely to. Well, if the unemployment rate is high, I'm less likely to be able to get a job. So it's like I might as well go to grad school.
Yeah, exactly. Right, because is your opportunity cost to go into grad school? Because typically you go to grad school, you get a job. It's hard to do both.
Yeah.
People do it part-time, honestly speaking. So is your opportunity cost high or low if the unemployment rate is really high, if the economy is not doing well?
At that point, your opportunity cost
It's low. Right? What are you giving up by going to grad school? What are you giving up by going to grad school under these economic circumstances? Well, I mean, but that's what you spend. You're always giving up your time. Money. That's what you spend. You get a job. What kind of job are you giving up if the economy is doing badly? Probably a bad job, right? How do we define bad job? Low in pay, sure. Right. Other qualities? Mm-hmm.
Hard job.
Might be hard. Unskilled. Something called the underemployment rate. Something you can look up by different majors have different underemployment rates. Something we'll talk about. Underemployment is I have this job, I have a bachelor's degree and I have this job, but the job does not require a bachelor's degree. You are underemployed is one way to measure it. So we can imagine maybe somebody getting the job. Like the classic example of this is, oh, I majored in like, art history or something, and I have a job at Starbucks. Like that's the stereotypical story of that. So we can imagine like, oh, the economy's really bad, and I have this bachelor's degree in engineering, all I can get is a job at Starbucks. Not that there's anything wrong with a job at Starbucks, but generally speaking, if you have an engineering degree, it's not a career building job. Because I would also define a good job as one that you can also build skills and develop advancement and go further in your career and make more money long term by getting that experience, relevant experience. And Starbucks probably won't provide that for people majoring in science and engineering. If the economy is doing well, though, what kind of job can you get? Nice job, right? How do we define nice job? Good pay. Career building, right? Job where you can get valuable experience and you can advance, right? Maybe within the company, maybe to a different company, whatever it is. In other words, if you are going to grad school under these economic conditions, is your opportunity cost high or low? High, right? We're giving up a lot. And that's why we see such a strong. But note, in order to describe what's actually going on, you really need opportunity cost. You really need that concept to be able to talk in terms of foregone benefits, because that's really what's going on here. Any questions on this? A little bit of life advice then. Some of you might imagine your career goal is to have a job that requires going to grad school. There are a lot of jobs that are really great that require grad school education. If that is your career goal, if that is what you're going to do, I plan to go to grad school. I'm definitely going to go to grad school. You should go when the economy is doing very well. And that sounds very counterintuitive and contradictory to what I just said. Let me explain. Bachelor's degree, there's research that suggests it doesn't really matter where you go. Some people argue with that back and forth. It's a big question mark there. But that is certainly not true for grad school. Where you go for grad school matters a lot. If you want to go to law school, your priority should be getting the best possible law school you can get, because that will give you the most opportunities. Same thing with MBA, same thing with any number of degrees. You really want to get into the best law school you can, the best grad school you can. Well, if you go when there are not many people interested in going to grad school, how is that good for you? Yeah. Yeah, you can get into a better grad school. You have less competition. And yes, it's going to be expensive for you because you're giving up a lot as far as like short term. This is where we can talk short term versus long term. You are giving up a lot there, but precisely because you are giving up a lot, you are then making it easier to make a better investment in it. Right? Precisely because there are not many people who want to, precisely because it's so expensive to go in terms of opportunity cost, that is why you have less competition and can build something for yourself long term. Which is why I frame this as, if your life plans involve going to grad school, if you're going to grad school regardless, you want to go here, not here. To the extent that you can control this kind of thing. All right, any questions? Yeah.
From what, probably around 1997 to 1992, was that a time before they realized that going to grad school during if in the economy would be beneficial?
Yeah, I'm not really sure why this is so muted, because everything else follows it very closely. It might just be maybe the benefits, as you mentioned, the benefits of grad school. I won't call it realized, but the benefits of grad school were just less, possibly, because maybe you didn't need grad school as much for many different jobs. But that's a great question. I'm not sure why the effect is kind of diminished there, because it seems like almost it doesn't matter right here. Right? There's a little bit of effect. And I would love to get more updated data, but this is from a comic. You can see the copyright 2008. And I don't even know where he got the data from. But. All right, let's get rid of this. I don't think I need it right now. And hit these notes. It still seems whatever. So let's talk then in terms of something a little more macroeconomic, but still related to opportunity cost. Farming. Look this up. In the 1700s, what percent of Americans do you think were farmers? 30. What percent of Americans do you think were farmers? 1700s. Yeah. Over 50. It is over 50. Higher than that. 70? Higher than that. 80. 80% of people, and I should say people because a lot of people were not considered to be people. I'm not considered to be, I don't know if they were considered to be Americans, technically. 3%. But regardless, most of the population was involved in farming, hands down. 1900s, about what percent? Higher or lower, do you think? Lower. How much lower, Liam? Want to give me a guess?
Probably of the population.
Close 40. Not quite as big of a fall, but still quite a fall. From 80% to 40%. From by far the most common occupation to now just a plurality. 2020s. What percent of the population do you think are farmers? It gets a little tricky how we define farmers, but people working on a farm, lower than that. Looked up data discussed today, about 1.2%. Huge decline.
I don't believe it's.
You don't believe me? Well, how many people are in the United States? Yeah, 330, something like that. Yeah. And this is, I guess this would be labor force. So maybe we're looking at closer to like 150 million. So we're still looking at like over 1 million farmers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it gets tricky. When I say it gets tricky, and by farm, I think I also include ranchers in this as well. So people raising chickens. Too. But the definition of a farmer can get a little sticky and a little complicated. Like, do you include the person who's transporting the food from the farm to the location? You know, there's some bleeding in there. Back then, there wasn't that kind of specialization. Now there is. So there's a give here. But the point is, it's a lot lower. Now, are we starving? Because we have fewer people farming? What's happened? How are we not starving? Taylor, you shook your head.
Well, I mean, now companies just make food that's with fake ingredients and processed stuff.
Well, I mean, I know what you mean. I get a little confused when people say fake ingredients because they are real ingredients. They may not be healthy for you, but they are real. Yeah.
I was gonna say like outsourcing and technology.
That's true, right? There's food that we import. There's also food that we export. One of our biggest exporters is soybeans. We export tons of soybeans. Yeah.
Population increase.
Sure, but why would that cause a smaller percent of people to be farmers?
Because let's say in the 1700s, like you still had a million farmers, but then there were only like the population was really low, so the percentage was high. But now there's like a huge population, but there's still
But now we have 1 million people feeding 100 million people rather than 1 million people feeding 1.2 million people.
right.
So you would think that if we need that ratio, right, because everyone needs to eat, right, it would keep going up. Yeah, Kevin.
More availability of jobs and in different like roles.
Sure, there's more, but at the same time, right, like everyone needs to eat. So no one's gonna be like, well, now I'm just gonna start painting and I'll starve. I mean, as people do say that, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Instead of everything having to pick one piece of food, it's like we have these machines that go through food.
Yeah.
Or they watered up all the food.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Technology has changed everything. It has enabled us to have a very small portion of the population to produce food at vast quantities. Even in organic farming, there is still a lot of production like enhancements due to things like the tractor. Like organic farmers, I assume, still use tractors. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I assume they do. So that is what's caused this transformation. Now, do you think that when things like crop, and then this also includes things like crop rotation and genetically modified organisms and pesticides and everything, all these different technologies, do you think that when we started saying, oh, we do not need so many farmers, sorry, I guess you're out of a job, you're going to die. Do you think that people said, oh, I don't like this technology anymore, I won't have a job anymore, and I guess huge chunks of the population just don't work? Is that what we see? Do we see like 70% of Americans just don't have jobs because we don't need so many farmers? No. What do we see?
Other jobs rise.
Jobs rise. I bring this up because it makes sense now, right? We can spend less labor to create food, and that allows labor to do other things. There's an opportunity cost. Labor is a scarce resource. It can do other things. But that concern of, well, technology or trade or immigration takes jobs, and therefore people are unemployed, is wrong. We call this the lump of labor fallacy. It's the mistaken understanding that there is a fixed amount of work. And if we economize on labor, if we find ways to reduce how many people we need to do a certain job, therefore just people are going to be unemployed. And that's not the case. There's theoretically some satiation point in the economy, but there's no evidence we're anywhere near that. So whenever anyone says, well, I don't like AI because it destroys jobs, economist says, that's good. We are economizing on jobs, and so now people can do other things. When someone says, oh, well, I don't like the fact that immigrants come in and take my job, it's like, but that's good because you can do other things. In fact, notably, one thing that Americans end up doing when we have a lot of immigration is they end up becoming managers. It's like construction. It's complements, not substitutes. Oh, I don't like trade because when they're importing stuff from abroad, that means that's manufacturing jobs we can't do. No, you can do something. I don't mean to say the transition period is not painful. It is. It's hard to get retrained, and some people never figure it out. And that's bad for that particular group of people. But it would be reckless and wrong to say, and therefore we should never change. And therefore no one should ever adapt. And the economy should never encounter any disruption. Because if that was the case, then 80% of us would still be. And that would clearly be a very poor world. Think of all the wonderful things you have. Because people decide to make computers and vaccines and scientific research and all kinds of wonderful things. Any questions on that? Okay. So if we recognize the value of number one, and we recognize the value of number two, we can combine them to get the third big idea. The two big ideas are really most important. Everything from economics derives from these two big ideas, or is not really that interesting. And one clear thing that comes out of these two big ideas that's worth standing on its own is a quote from economist Thomas Sowell. There are no solutions. Only trade-offs. Well, there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. Does anyone know or want to guess what Thomas Sowell probably meant by that? Yep.
Everything has a cost with regards to development.
Okay, what do you mean?
Nothing comes to free.
Okay.
Like with farming, 80% of people being farmers, poor country. Developing country means less people are farmers, which, as you said, in the short term would be a negative to transition.
Yeah.
But in exchange, you end up gaining further development and further wealth, both culturally and monetarily. down the
Yeah.
line.
Yeah, exactly. Like, to emphasize, like, what do we think we mean by a solution? What does he mean by a solution?
Quick fix that ends all the problems.
A quick fix that ends all the problems, right? In other words, an answer that has no downside. Well, if there were solutions, if there were answers to problems without any downside, without any bad thing, would we adopt them?
Probably.
Yeah, definitely. Why? There's no downside. Right? Incentives matter. If there was a solution out there, it would have already been adopted. All solutions would have already been adopted. And thus we have to recognize that it's all about trade-offs. That any good thing that you get must come at the expense of some other good thing. Case in point, any good thing we get, economic progress, in the terms of consolidated labor, comes at the expense of something else that's good, right? It's bad when people lose their job. It's bad when they have this instability. It's bad when people are suffering as they're making this transition. We give up that kind of stability when we embrace some sort of economic dynamism. The existence of opportunity costs means good things come at the expense of other good things. I want to emphasize this doesn't mean that everything's a wash. It's like, well, I guess there's good stuff over here, there's good stuff over here, so it doesn't really matter what you choose. There are still good ideas and there are still bad ideas. There are things that, sure, what we get is huge, but what we give up is small. It's a good idea. This is why we have cost-benefit analysis. We're just saying there's always something in every column. There are always some sort of costs, there are always some sort of benefits for any reasonable solution we can think of. Granted, I think that there's probably options out there that are just strictly stupid, but any reasonable proposal somebody's putting forward has to also come with some bad parts. If it didn't, it would have already been adopted by now. Yeah.
But isn't the existence of that pretty much saying that, where it means that that wasn't true, we wouldn't really have much of an economy, because most economy is based off people finding a way to solve some problem or to do one thing or another. So if those solutions didn't continue to cause problems, wouldn't we stop having economic growth?
I mean, what you're saying is essentially, if solutions didn't, I won't say solutions, right? Because that's something, a solution is an answer on that side. But if, I don't know, if like answers, proposed answer didn't cause some sort of other problem, then we're entering a world where we don't have scarcity anymore.
Yeah.
And so, and like that would be great to be emphasized. Like, I wouldn't have a job anymore. No one would do economics. But in a hypothetical world where there is no scarcity, that is a world where we can eventually reach a point where there's no downside to things. Is that what you're saying? I think I've lost track of your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's saying that when you decide to find an answer to something, your answer is, by that statement, not perfect. there's going to be downsides to that state.
Yeah.
But that gives a problem for someone else to try and.
Yes. Absolutely. Case in point, horses. Right. So, does anyone know why the curbs, why the sidewalk is elevated above the road? Like, why isn't it flush with the road? Why is it elevated above? Yeah.
Easier to get on a horse.
Nope. I mean, I guess that helps, but I don't think so. It's because when horses, nope, not for horse safety. It's because when horses were the common mode of transportation, and horses, there were a lot of horses then. And what do all horses do? They poop. And the streets, especially in major cities, where there were horses everywhere, were rivers of shit. And so we elevated the sidewalk to prevent people from walking through shit all the time, right? And help contain the poop in what area so it didn't get everywhere. That's why sidewalks are crazy. Cars solved that problem, right? Cars were able to get horses out of the way, freed up a lot of land too. Like 40% of our land was used to grow oats to feed horses. I would be thinking of England, but it's the same story, same idea. And it also meant that we didn't have our mode of transportation pooping everywhere. Now, to your point, though, it did create a new problem, right? We now have air pollution rather than horse shit pollution. I would argue that I'd rather have air pollution than horse shit pollution, but that's, to your point, we now have a new problem to solve. And so I think that my really sloppy way of initially answering your question is that creating a perfect society. And it's all about we are making things better, but you cannot come to the approach of you are making things perfect. That is unreasonable. But we can just say, is this going to be an improvement? This seems like an improvement. Let's push forward. It will create problems. And the temptation is to yell at people who say, oh, how dare you create a problem when you were trying to solve something else? Economists do not look kindly at such reaction. So much so that we have a term for it. The Nirvana fallacy. That was actually nice to read it. Right. It is a tendency to compare an actual thing with an idealized alternative. So people will complain about the status of some aspect of the status quo without seriously considering the alternatives. An interesting example of this is during the 1970s, environmental groups got really pissed off at nuclear power. They said, we shouldn't be using this nuclear power anymore. What are the problems with nuclear power? Radiation concerns. What else? It's expensive. I don't know if they care too much about that. It's certainly very expensive. It's huge cost of a nuclear power plant. Huge cost, but these were ones that already existed. The operating cost is very low, but the upfront cost is massive. Yeah.
Is it dangerous?
Yeah, those concerns are meltdown.
Isn't it like after that's the person has to be there. Like you have to leave it there. You can't.
Yeah, I'm not sure all the things that are required to shut it down and leave it dormant. I don't know if you can remove the material and make it be used for something else, or if what you're saying is, well, that's just an area we can't use anymore. Okay. We can come up with these problems of nuclear power, right? You got this nuclear waste you got to put somewhere. There's a concern of meltdown. There's a cost to build it. There's a cost to decommission it, if it even can be decommissioned fully. And so environmental groups would protest the construction of nuclear power plants. And they would block them and say, this is not what we should do. What we should do instead is build solar power everywhere. We should have wind. We should just reduce our electrical output. That's what we should do. Use less electricity. The problem is, in the 1970s, solar panels were not very efficient. Wind power was not very efficient. And telling people, let's just use less electricity is not a reasonable thing. It might be something that people idealize. Sure, I'm sure that the environmentalists, when they're talking amongst each other, like, this is fantastic. This is what everyone should do. Yeah, completely unmoored from the realities of everyone else. And so when they successfully blocked nuclear power plants, what happened? Yeah.
Started burning more coal and gas.
We started burning coal and gas. Right. And we have more coal power plants, we had more oil power plants, gas power plants. And that, regardless of what you say about nuclear power, as far as pollution goes, that's worse. And so we want to avoid thinking in terms of, if only people would just, in the history of the world, people have never just done anything. Put that aside. It's always about comparing between trade-offs. Yes, nuclear power has problems. It's a hell of a lot cleaner than the alternatives. And it's really efficient. Once built, it's super efficient. Even accounting for the cost of construction. But people tend to fall into that. Any questions? Okay. Let's get rid of this thing. This is old. How are you doing? I know we're about, I know, we have like, what, 20 minutes left? More or less? You guys are good? Fall asleep? I mean, if you are, tough shit, I'm going to keep going anyway. But I was just checking in. Okay, I'll leave this up. Let's see. Yeah. We'll do this and this, and then we'll be done. Okay. So now what we are going to do is discuss an idea that is going to build into our foundational diagram for economics. We are not going to build the diagram today. I don't think. We got to get some background terminology in. And then tomorrow, and I'm sorry, on Tuesday we'll build it. But we got to get started somewhere. Critical to how we build this diagram is how economists think about value and think about how people make decisions. Water is necessary for life. When you buy water, are you thinking how great water is and how fantastic that we have water in the world? No, generally not. What are you thinking when you buy a bottle of water? You need water to drink it. I wouldn't even necessarily say, if you don't have that water, would you die? No, so need is a funny word, right? Need is a funny word. Yeah? You're thirsty. I'm thirsty. You are not thinking in terms of water as a categorical thing. Oh, well, water is fantastic. I love water. You're thinking in terms of, I'm thirsty. I want to satisfy some need, some desire. In other words, you're thinking on the margin. Marginalism is this idea that people make decisions on the margin. And margin change in total. Marginal benefit is change in total benefit. Marginal cost is change in total cost. Marginal profit is change in total profit. Marginal duck is change in total duck. It's always that additional more that you're getting. A little bit more, a little bit less. The marginal consumer in business is that consumer that if you do the additional work, that's the person that will switch over and buy your product. I really like Star Trek. And if you know anything about Star Trek, you know that Star Trek is on which streaming service? Paramount Plus. And many Star Trek fans are upset because a show has been canceled by Paramount Plus, a Star Trek cartoon, Lower Decks. And none of you know what we're talking about, but you know what I'm talking about. What's Lower Decks about?
The junior officers of the ship instead of generally the senior crew.
Yeah. And it makes fun of Star Trek a lot, right? Yeah. A lot of it is like poking fun at some weird things that have happened in Star Trek over the many, many seasons and series it's had. And people were like, oh, why are they canceling it? It's such a great show. We love it so much. And I'm like, I'm amazed it went on for as many seasons as it did. Because Paramount Plus running Lower Decks, which is a niche show of a niche like franchise. I mean, I don't know how niche Star Trek is, but it's not mainstream, it's not football. It's like, that's kind of amazing. Because if they take it away, you're probably going to still have Paramount Plus. Right? You're probably going to keep watching Star Trek, the various other Star Trek shows you want. This is not like a ghetto for them. You're not the marginal consumer here. And so thinking on the margin helps in lots of different areas. It comes up in lots of different economics. How much do you value a bottle of water when you buy it? Is it really, really high? Is it the most valuable thing ever? No? You shook your head no? How much do you value it, sir?
If you are like thirsty for water, but you're not.
You desire it more. Yeah. But it's not like, if you take a bottle of water from your life, you probably won't notice it, right? Yeah. Why is that?
You can find it everywhere.
Partly. Not only can you find it everywhere, you can soil everywhere. It's because you've consumed so much of it. And for lots of different things. Obviously drinking water, but also in cooking, also in cleaning, also in water balloon fights, also in bathing. A lot of different things over the course of your life. You take a bottle of water or a gallon of water from your life, you probably wouldn't even notice it. Your bathtub is a little lower on the water level. We call this diminishing, marginal, utility. Utility is a fancy economic word for satisfaction or benefit. But everyone uses the term utility. So we're going to throw that in. Each additional unit consumed becomes less and less value. Yeah. Sure. It's essentially like, so margin is by definition right chain control, which means if you get an additional dollar, that is your marginal profit, or that is your marginal income, right? Because it's the additional amount of money. If you are making a decision about what to buy, you are not thinking in terms of like how great paper towels are. You're thinking in terms of how much you need an additional roll of paper towels. You're thinking in terms of that is the value. If you get more and more paper towels, then each additional paper towel that you get will become less and less valuable to you. That makes sense. As a side note too, if you are interested in majoring in economics, you have to know some calculus. Calculus is required of all econ majors. This is because change in total, for those of you who had calculus, sounds a lot like what? What? F prime is x, also known as A begins with a D. Derivative. That's literally what it is, right? It's the change in total. And so if you do more economics and we do some math, and then you get some equations, and one thing you have to do is you have to take the derivative. Because we have to find the equation for the change in total, because that's how people make decisions on the margin. All right. Ooh, let's get rid of this. I'm gonna need this. Actually, I'm gonna get rid of this too. I think I want to use that. Oops. I didn't mean to erase this. Okay. Richard, let's imagine I were to give you an apple. What would you do with this first apple I give you? Eat. People like to eat their first apple. If I were to give you a second apple, what would you do with this apple?
Save it for later.
Excellent. And if I were to give you a third apple, what would you do with it?
Also save it.
Okay. That's fine. You're saving 2 apples for later. If I would only give you 2 apples, which of these 3 things would you not do?
Wait, say that again?
If you were to only have 2 apples instead of 3, which of these 3 items would you not do?
Save it.
Save it. Why? That's correct. Why is that correct?
Sorry.
You already have one?
Yeah.
Because it was your lowest priority thing. Each additional unit you get becomes less and less valuable to you. So your second apple saved is going to be by definition less valuable than your third apple, than your first apple. If you were to assign a dollar value, what's the most you're willing to pay to eat an apple?
Like $2 to $3 probably.
I'm going to give you $3. How much would you be willing to pay to save 1 apple? $1. That is correct. Why is that correct? There were wrong answers here. Why was that correct? What was one of the correct answers? Yeah. Well, let me ask you this instead. What would have been an incorrect answer? Such as, so give me an example. No, I'm talking about numbers. Give me a number that would have been wrong. 5, yeah. How can I say that Richard is wrong in his value? If he had said 5, that would have been wrong. Yeah, I did.
Because he would be saying that he wants to save the apple, or he wants the apple.
Yeah, right? And that would have made sense, right? If it was so valuable to you, you would have done it first. You would have I'm not that hungry right now, but I definitely want to eat this apple later. I put it aside. If it was so valuable for you, then it would have been first. But clearly it's not. Clearly he's hungry now. It's lunchtime. How much would you be willing to pay to save a second apple?
Less than $1.
Less than $1. How much? 50 cents. Again, as long as it's less. I guess it could be $1 as well. You could be indifferent between 1 and 2, but that seems a little weird. I would say 50 cents is reasonable. Okay. Well, just as they're diminishing marginal utility, right, and we see this, each additional unit becomes less and less valuable, there is a flip side to this. Do you want to guess what the flip side is? I like where you're going with that. You said appreciate it. What is that word? Rather than going down, it is increasing. I guess we could say decreasing, right? We don't do that because we like to make things complicated. Increasing. Marginal. What? What's the opposite of benefit? Cost. Each additional unit produced becomes more and more costly. It's harder to produce things the more you produce that same thing. Where do apples come from? Trees. And if I were to pick an apple for Richard, where would I pick the apple from first? Where on the tree? The what? The closest, right? The low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit, right? So I'll pick the place that's easiest for me. If, rather than hand, Richard is like, but I want another apple to save it for later. I'm like, well, shit, and I have to get a ladder, I have to start climbing up. And now it's getting harder and harder, costlier and costlier for me to get this apple. Just as the maximum he is willing to pay will go down for each apple, the minimum I require to get the apple for him will start going up. Not a big deal to pick the low-hanging fruit first. I don't even have to get a ladder. So maybe I only need, like, say, 25 cents. But then he needs me to get onto the next branch. Maybe I need $1 to do that. And he wants to, oh, but I want to save a second apple for later. I'll pay 50 cents for that. And I'll have to go all the way to the top of the tree. And that's, ooh, I don't know about that. I need $5 to get up to that. Will we pick a first apple? Will that first apple be picked and sold?
Probably.
Yeah. Why?
Because the first apple, and you haven't put in that much work, and he's willing to pay the amount for it.
Yeah. We have a lot of room for negotiation. He's saying, I'm willing to pay $3 to get that apple. I'm saying I only need $0.25 to get the apple. So maybe we negotiate, maybe it's $1, maybe it's $2, maybe it's 75 cents. We have a lot of points of negotiation, a lot of points of agreement, I should say, a lot of points of agreement here. So that occurs. What about the second apple? Will we pick the second apple?
Most of the time. Most of the time, yeah.
Yeah. Right? Is there any room for negotiation?
No.
No. This is why I framed it as, what is the most you are willing to pay? The most is willing to pay is $1. What is the least amount I'm willing to accept? I'm willing to accept at least $1. Right? So we can agree. We have no room for adjustment there. There's no wiggle room on either side. But it happens. What about for the third apple? Does it get picked? No. Why not? What do you mean, Kermit? Yeah. I need at least $5 to climb all the way up there. He's like, I'm willing to pay like a tenth of that. I'm like, well, I guess I'm not going up there. Right. It doesn't happen. And it's good it doesn't happen. Because I have to incur a rather large cost to do something that has a very small benefit. We do not want scarce labor or energy or resources of any kind to go for things that are not that beneficial. Thus, the optimal quantity is when the marginal cost equals the marginal benefit. Always, 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 always. Okay. Do I have any questions? Okay. We got a few minutes. I want to do one more thing. Let's do a little example. We'll put Q right here, quantity. Total benefit, total cost. Quantity is 0. Seems like no benefit of cost. 21, 22, 23, 24. Now, I forgot to write this down. I had an idea. I'll figure it out. Let's see. Let's go with like a benefit of 10 and 30 and sorry, this one. We'll do like 100 and 180 and 220 and 200. Okay. And then over here, I'm going to try to do the same thing. 230. I want to have maybe like 20 here, and then 100 here. Do I do this right? Hold on. This is a little, it's hard to do this perfectly. I think I know. I can do this. 16. Yeah. And then this is 120. Okay. I think that'll work out. So, where's the optimal?
4.
Why do you say 4?
Because the benefit and the cost are equal.
So be careful though. This is not marginal benefit, not marginal cost. This is total benefit and total cost. So, how do we convert? Yeah. Nope. Whatever. What's margin mean? Change in total. So Francis. Yeah. So I'll actually do it in blue. There's no marginal benefit here. So what's the marginal benefit of the first unit, Francis? What is margin? Marginal cost is. Say it with me. So marginal benefit is going to be change in total benefit. What is the change in total benefit going from 0 to 1? 100. What's the change in total benefit going from 1 to 2? 80. We're just subtracting. What's the change in total benefit? Anyone for 3? What's the third unit? 40. And this I did school. Just do. Sorry. That's the new number. What's the change in total benefit for the fourth unit? 10. Okay. What's the marginal cost? Anyone of the first unit? 30. What's the marginal cost of the second unit? 30 again. That's okay. That's okay. Sometimes it can be monotonic. What's the marginal cost of the third unit? 40. What's the marginal cost of the fourth unit? 130. Huge. It's really expensive. Here we have each additional unit becomes cheaper and cheaper. Here we have each additional unit becomes more and more expensive. Monotonic means it either stays the same or goes up and down in one direction. Right? And so this is, it's not, it's just, I made it just as easy. Maybe I could throw in some additional cost right here, maybe 20, whatever. Where's the optimal now? So, Raheem, where's the optimal quantity?
3.
3. Why?
Because now the margin.
And appreciate, too, the logic behind that. Because if you went with 4, like you initially did, you're getting an additional benefit of 10 at an additional cost of 130. That's a bad decision. So the optimal is always for marginal cost equals marginal benefit. Yeah.
How'd you get the margin cost?
So I subtracted.
What did you subtract?
When we go from 0 to 1, the change in total went from 0 to 100. So 100 minus 0 is 100. Going from 1 to 2, we went from 100 to 180. So the change in total is 80. 180 minus 100.
I'm talking about the margin cost.
Marginal cost is the same story.
Oh, okay.
30 minus 0 is 30.
Oh, okay.
60 minus 30 is 30. 100. That's why I was like, when I was doing this, because I thought I had written down an example already in my notes, and I was like, oh crap. I either wrote it down and can't find it, or I updated my notes and I forgot to include it. So I was coming up with it. I wanted the numbers at the bottom to be equal so that people will say this is the answer. But to emphasize, but then I had to make everything. So just pretend I did it correctly the first time. Any other questions? Okay. So what we are going to do next time? Oh yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
So basically you said that reason they're option because your benefits become your cost.
The marginal benefit equals marginal cost.
So that's like
Yeah. I mean, you can do it within yourself, right? Like, whenever you do work, for example, if you're cleaning your house, there is an additional cost to cleaning because it's taking up more and more time, and each additional hour spent is going to be a higher and higher opportunity cost. And then the more you clean, the less beneficial of a thing you're going to clean. Like when you start cleaning, the first thing you might clean is like the kitchen. And then if you keep cleaning for like 4 hours or 8 hours, at the end you're like polishing your light bulb. Right? And so it can be combined with it. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Anyone else? Okay, so that's what we have time for today. I will see you then on Tuesday. I hope you have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.